Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back again today to start a brand new series on the channel. Of course, you guys already saw what it was in both the title and the thumbnail of this video, so I'm not going to hold it hostage and question it for too long. Yes, I will be talking about the Witch Watch anime, and I am honestly just really so happy to. I have been following Witch Watch since the first chapter came out in Weekly Shonen Jump, and what was that? It was late January of 2021, if I'm not mistaken, but this manga has been running for a long time now. I mean, it's been running for over 4 years, and whenever we got the anime announcement in December of 2024, I was like, I am so ready for this. I've been waiting for Witch Watch for so long, and I just absolutely love this series. I mean, Witch Watch, it's also by my favorite author of all time, Kento Shinohara, or I should say tied for my favorite author of all time, both Kino Shinohara and Yuji Kaku. I love all of the works that they have made and just think that they are both great authors. So, of course, Kento Shinohara wrote Astra Lost in Space, which was another animated series, which if you guys have not checked out Astra Lost in Space yet, check that out first and then come back to this video, or watch this video first, then go check out it, whatever, but just make sure to be keeping your eye out for the radar for that series, because it's also an absolutely amazing one with a great anime adaptation, all things considered. But if we're talking about great anime adaptations, of course, that's how I'm going to be looking at the lens of this Witch Watch episode number 1 here. Of course, I'll be going through all of the various plot that we got in this episode, just breaking it all down, sort of seeing hey, what they do here. But also, I'm really just going to be looking at this episode from the lens of a manga reader who's been reading this manga for, well, 4 years at this point, right? Because really, the anime does a whole lot to not only solidify the early art style of Witch Watch, which has really evolved as time went on, really happens with any long-running anime or manga, and it honestly just takes every part of the first little part of this story and makes it so much better. But yeah, again, this was Witch Watch episode number 1 we're going to be talking about. Of course, it is written by Kento Shinohara, and the animation studio producing this is Bilberry Animation Studios. This episode does cover chapters 1 and 2 of the manga, and this episode is titled Witch's Return. So yeah, with all of that out of the way, just no reason for me not to just go ahead and start heading in and talking about, hey, what happened in this episode of Witch Watch? Because hey, this is just a really good episode, like I said, really solidifying how great this series is, right? So we start off with a little bit of a flashback where we see the two main characters of the series, whose names are Morito and Nico. Sometimes I'll be shortening Morito to Moi, as we will learn it's something that Nico actually did. We will see that later on in the episode. But we start off with the two of these children, as pretty much we see that Nico is going along in her life, and that she's getting ready to move away from wherever her and Morito live. We see they've pretty much been childhood friends for a very long time, and pretty much she says hey, I gotta go out and train all of these various places, but Morito, one day, let's meet again. We then cut to some time in the future whenever Morito is a bit older, as we see that as he's walking around his town, there's a bunch of these various thugs who come up and say, hey, what are you doing around here? Hey, I know you. You're the one who tried to save that kid and stop us for grabbing his lunch money on our graduation day. Hey, we're gonna go beat up you, pretty much, right? There's a whole bunch of comedy stuff. Of course, Witch Watch is a comedy manga, so all of this various comedy stuff going around with it. And the main guy that we see here is just constantly called Kelpfish. I don't really know if we know what his name is, but he's just always referred to that because his hair does look like a kelpfish, pretty much, right? Morito goes to pretty much be hey, I'm not putting up with your shit, pretty much, but all of these people then come around and just start beating up Morito to a point where he gets pretty roughed up, all things considered, right? We then see Morito goes to his house, and he's eating either breakfast or lunch, or I don't quite know what they're eating, but they're eating some meal, as we see that Morito is eating with his father. If I'm not mistaken, Morito's father is named Reiji. Don't quote me on that, because even now, we recently had him show up in the manga for a little while again in an arc of some kind. I won't really go into all of that very much. We're talking about the anime, don't really need to give manga spoilers. But even when I talk about the Witch Watch manga here on the channel, I always cannot remember the father's name. It's either Reiji or Genji. I think it is Reiji, but don't quite quote me on that. Maybe I should just go to yeah. I mean, I have my computer open in front of me, locked my page of notes, so, is it Ray? How do I spell that? R-E-I, Reiji, Oto. Yes, his name is Reiji. I was correct on that pretty much front. Hey, I finally remembered his name at one point. It's not for the manga whenever he actually showed up. It's for the anime, right? By the way, you see Morito and his father Reiji here, right? Pretty much doing all stuff. And his father just asks, hey, Morito, why do you always lose to all of these people, like, whenever you're fighting? I mean, you have the strength to be able to quell them, pretty much, right? As Morito's like, hey, you know what happened whenever I punched a kid earlier in life? I could not control my powers back then, right? As we learn pretty much, yes, Morito is an ogre, and pretty much how it works is that in the old days, witches had all of these various familiars that came through, and as time went on, all of these familiars bred with each other and eventually bred with humans until the point where now, in the current day, people, all of the familiars that are left are just humans like Morito and his father, who are both ogres, right? Morito's father pretty much asked him, like, hey, do you remember Nico the witch? And Morito's like, oh yeah, she was around in 4th grade and she had to move away to go do her witch training, pretty much, right? And Reiji's like, yes, I'm glad you remember her. Well, pretty much, she wants to make you Morito, her familiar. And Morito's like, what are you talking about? And Reiji even says, like, hey, I know it's really weird, but we must follow the honor code that we as familiars have had for a very long time, right? And Morito's like, hey, but I mean, what about you? And there's a little bit of a weird joke where Morito's father's just like, oh, I'd love to be the familiar for a young teenage girl, pretty much, right? But eventually he just says, like, hey, I have to go on a long business trip starting tomorrow, so you and Nico will be living together here in this house. But he also says, hey, if anything, you're going to be more of a bodyguard to her than anything, right? More on that later, right? Well, we cut pretty much to the next day where Morito's father's off doing all of his own stuff, and Morito's just sitting inside like, man, it's been a while since I really even thought about Nico. Like, I wonder how that klutz has grown up, right? And as he's just sitting here looking out his window reminiscing on the past, all of a sudden, somebody flies into the window. As we see, this is none other than Nico flying in on a pretty much magic broom, like just flying through the air as you normally see witches are, right? And here's where we really start the whole part of the series. Yes, it is a rom-com. There's a lot of rom-com aspects to go around with both Morito and Nico. Like, hey, we're going to be living together, all of this various stuff, right? But eventually the whole idea is like, hey, Morito's, like, one of his main windows is just broken, and he's like, hey, let me sweep all of this up. And like I said, comedy stuff is going on during this time. And eventually, Nico's like, hey, well, I have one of these spells, and it's called a Witch Recovery. Like, hey, do you have something that's very valuable, like an item that you enjoy very much, right? Morito's like, oh yeah, I have this old vintage cup of mine. I love drinking it out of, like, coffee out of it in the mornings, right? And Nico's like, okay then, and she holds up one hand up to the window, the broken window, and another over to the mug, and uses her spell, Witch Recovery, which ends up repairing the window, but sacrificing the mugs. We pretty much learn, like, hey, the way this spell works is by going around and turning emotions into actual magical power to either replace something, but it has to be destroyed, and vice versa, pretty much, right? And Morito's very much like, hey, what about all this? Like, why'd it have to be my cup? And Nico's like, oh, I guess it was my fault. I should have done something. Like, hey, I guess I haven't changed at all. But Morito's like, no, you really have. Thank you, Nico, right? It's a little bit of a very nice moment. And eventually Nico's like, oh, well, how about this? I mean, I just showed you that spell, so let me show you a few of my other spells, right? And she's like, hey, I've got this spell that can make anything as flat as paper. Do you have anything I can use it on? And Morito having, like, a lot of these flashbacks to earlier in life, like whenever him and Nico would go around doing all of these things, he's like, gosh, I don't really have anything. And he doesn't really say that, but Nico just says, like, hey, you know what? I'll cast it on myself. And she uses the flip, flap, flat spell. Try saying that 3 times fast. Flip, flap, flap. Flip, flap, flap. Flip. I'm just messing it up. I can't even say it myself. Can you guys? Who knows, right? But either way, we see what happens is she ends up turning herself into flat as paper and starts drifting out the window to the outside world, right? And Morito goes around to chase her, try to get her through all of this various stuff, but she ends up falling into a crack between 2 pieces of cement, right? And concrete and all this other stuff. Really just all the masonry things, like, she ends up falling into a crack between 2 of these 2 edges, and Morito's like, oh crap, how am I going to be getting her out of here, right? And eventually he's like, all right, how about this? I can go home, grab a vacuum cleaner, and almost suck you out. But Nico's like, hey, I don't know how much longer this spell will last, and if I get undone with the spell while I'm in here, I'll, like, really become flat, right? And Morito's like, oh no, this isn't good. As we then see the thug guy from earlier, of course, who we were calling Kelpfish, he comes outside and he's like, hey, what are you doing here? This is my house, right? And Morito's like, oh gosh, I really don't want to get in a fight with you. But this guy's like, hey, what are you doing around here? He's like, hey, can I borrow your vacuum cleaner? But Kelpfish is like, no, not at all. You trying to start a fight with me? Is that what you're trying to do? And it's not really working all this well for Morito, as he also just thinks like, hey, in the past, whenever he was fighting for Nico, he used all of his ogre skills and brutally hurt somebody who he learned in the past was this same guy, of this Kelpfish guy, right? As pretty much he just thinks about all this, and we see a little bit of a flashback wherever Morito is sitting and talking with his father, and his father says like, hey, I know you got into a fight, but either way, good job for not going too all out using all of your powers, right? And a young Morito just says like, hey, what's the point of having this power? All it does is get me into countless fights, and I end up hurting someone, or I can't protect anyone. I can never do one or the other, right? So I either let somebody down, or I hurt somebody bad to get either whatever goal I want to have, right? As eventually his father just says like, hey, well, how about I start to train you in all of these ways, right? And Morito's like, what do you mean train? He just says like, hey, we can use this skill of Ogre Qui-Gong, right? Pretty much explaining like, hey, this is what all the ogres in the past use, and I can teach it to you because it's been passed down from generation to generation, right? As here in the moment, Morito just thinks like, hey, we can always fix this brick wall later, as he comes out and uses his Ogre Qui-Gong powers and uses an attack called Metal Club, comes through and punches into the side of all of these rock formations, pretty much exploding it into a bunch of various parts, right? He then reaches in, grabs out Nico. Nico transforms back into her, like, 3D body self, not being totally paper flat, right? And the Kelpfish guy's like, hey, what are you talking about, right? And he's like, oh wait, are you Nico from 4th grade? Anyway, my wall's been destroyed. What are we going to do about this? As Morito sort of just looks over and just says like, hey Nico, you want to use your Witch Recovery? And she's like, yep, I don't have anything precious to use right now, right? As Morito just says like, hey, well, you can use it on that guy's hair. And that's the whole joke there, is the wall gets recovered, but with the sacrifice of this guy's hair, right? At this point, we see that as Nico and Morito are walking home, they went on a little bit of a shopping spree because Nico's like, hey, I want to do something now that I'm back here in the big city, pretty much, right? And we see they're carrying out a lot of bags of stuff they bought from the supermarket, and just like, I guess it's like designer clothes, or not designer clothes, just like clothes and all of that various stuff, right? And Morito's like complaining a little bit like, golly, how much stuff did you really have to buy? It's just so heavy, right? Because of this, Nico's like, hey, I'll use a spell on you. It's called Super Light, pretty much, right? It makes anything that the spell gets cast on become super light, right? So Morito picks up, he's like, wow, this is very light, pretty much, right? And as they're walking home, Morito eventually says like, hey, so Nico, are we going to let the entire city know that you are a witch? And Nico pretty much says like, hey, the point of magic is to use it to help out people, right? And in turn, your skills to get better for helping out others, right? So pretty much, I help people and they help me by making my magic better. So in turn, I can go and help out even more people, right? And Morito's like, all right then. So I get what you're saying. You just want to be the best witch you can. So hey, I guess I'll help you out here, right? And at this point, we see they're just walking around, and Nico's mind starts to drift a little bit to maybe her and Morito dating a little bit, like, what would the whole reaction stuff be? It's a little bit of some comedy stuff, right? But all of a sudden, Morito just says, like, hey, Nico, it's a fire! And she's, like, in this trance, she's like, no, Nico, come on, wake up! There's a fire going over there! A building is on fire, right? As we see, there's just one sole person pretty much stuck in the building, just like, help me! Like, there's a fire burning down my home currently, right? As we pretty much see that Nico brings out her wand and says like, hey, I'm going to go save that person no matter what. So we see that she comes out, she takes out her wand, and it transforms into a little bit of a broom, and she goes up into the sky and like starts to do all this. But before she can go, Morito's like, hey, let me join you on this little bit of a thing. We can't have you going alone. So her and Morito hop up onto the broom, go all the way up to this like very like, it's like 7 or 8 stories. It's a pretty high building. End up saving this person. Everybody's watching. But as this third person, this woman, gets onto the broom, all of a sudden we realize the broom can't sustain 3 people, right? Because of this, Nico ends up casting her super light spell on Morito, making his personality super light, which is like, oh, look at that, but also his physically super light also. And that's all jokes like he's got a very, very light personality here in the moment, right? we see that it's still a bit too much to really get down to the ground safely, so Nico ends up casting Super Light on herself also. They crash down to the bottom of the ground, everybody's fine, but Morito and Nico have this really big just like, hey, look at this, we're all so happy and bubbly stuff pretty much, right? And they then realize, like, oh no, we left all the stuff we bought earlier just sitting on the ground. Let's go back and get it, right? As we see the Our Lady's like, hey, thank you so very much for saving me, right? Well, we cut back to the Otigi household where we see that Morito and Nico have just gotten back inside, and they're carrying all of these bags of stuff in, and as they do it, Morito's like, gosh, when did these bags get so heavy, right? As we see that there, of course, is a drawback to all of these magical spells, and the drawback in this case is that it makes everything super heavy after they became super light, right? And of course, we saw that Nico and Morito cast it on themselves earlier, and that makes their personalities also super heavy and depressing. A little bit of a funny joke, right? But definitely way more betterly executed in the animes you'll be getting into here in a second, right? We then see that both Morito and Nico are going to bed. Nico is trying to sleep in Morito's room, and Morito's like, hey, why are you doing all of this? But either way, Nico's like, hey, thank you for protecting me all day today, pretty much, right? As we cut back to whenever Morito and his father were sitting together at the dinner table, pretty much talking about like, hey, Nico wants to make you her familiar pretty much, right? As he pretty much is like, hey, there is a prophecy in the coming times that Nico is going to be befalled by a disaster, pretty much, right? And your job is to protect Nico. Nico's mother is an oracle, and pretty much one of the prophecies that she got was the protector shall be a familiar, right? Which means Morito seems to be this familiar, as Morito's just like, hey, no matter what, my one goal here is to protect Nico. That is my job at the end of the day. As Nico has this little moment where she's just like, oh man, I just really like Boy and all of these things. Like, man, I think I may even love him. A few more other like comedy aspects here in the moment, right? As Morito just thinks like, hey, it is my job. I will protect Nico at all cost. At this point, we get a little bit of like some narration just saying like, hey guys, thus begins the unusual living situation between a witch and an ogre. The words grim prospects stab at the ogre like a horn in his head, right? As of course, we're not at the end of the episode, but we have not seen an opening or ending sequence yet, which means that we get the opening theme of Witch Watch, which is Watch Me by Yoasobi. This opening is just so incredibly good. I love the stylistic art style it's pulling towards here every single second, and just listening to it through my headphones while I was watching this episode and taking down all my notes, I can tell this is just going to be a really fun, like, opening to see every single week, and just, like, the animation is really good. There's honestly a lot of hints to things that happen in future aspects of the manga. We see there's this one point where Morito falls into a TV and it's like he's living in a manga world, which was a chapter of the manga. So it's really funny just seeing how all of this various works. We see a bunch of the other important characters here in the story. I mean, we see Kanshi, we see Keigo, we see Nimue, right? All these other super important characters, but also just these, I've accidentally played there on my computer. Hopefully Yoasobi doesn't get me for that one little bit, but just a whole lot of really cool stuff seeing all of these characters, and this opening is going to be one for the ages. Of course, whenever Yoasobi does one of these anime openings, it's like, hey, it's a really big deal. I mean, I remember they did the first one, Idol, for Oshinoko. They did one for Frieren Beyond Journey's End, and like, hey, both of those series turned out absolutely massive. So I'm sure here in due time, Witch Watch is only just going to be blowing up, and hey, I'm proud and happy to say I've been with this series from day one, right? But that's not where the episode ends. The final thing is the next episode preview. There's a little bit of bantering between both Morito and Nico, but the whole thing is like, hey, the way this series seems like it's going to be divided is it's going to be divided sort of like in a Gintama situation where, hey, all of the early chapters are just comedy-based chapters strictly. So the next episode preview, the next episode is called A Giant Rookie, Let's Go to a Diner, and The Flying Classroom. So 3 different subsects to the next episode, or at least that's what it seems like so far. But either way, this was just a really awesome episode of Witch Watch, and going through the way they did this, I really do like it, because they very effortlessly merged both chapters 1 and 2 together to make it a so much better, coherent story. Because the beginning of this episode really travels out like chapter 1 of the manga did, going through like, hey, though the beginning is a bit different, of course, we did not get the Morito and like it's just ordered a whole lot differently. I'm sorry, that's what I'm trying to say here at the end of the day. But like the whole thing of like Morito and Nico as children, that doesn't come up until halfway through the chapter again, right? But it does make it a whole lot more of like a little bit of an emotional tale, giving us all of this at the very beginning, and then slowly moving down, and the chapter really progresses like normal. But the first chapter actually ends after the little thing with Kelpfish and after Nico is saved. And the first chapter ends with the whole idea of the prophecy, Nico's mother is the Oracle, and that, hey, you need to be her protector, Morito, right? And then chapter 2 actually starts off with them going to bed and Nico pretty much being like, hey, thank you so very much for all of this. And then after that, we have the whole shopping spree, and the end of chapter 2 is like, hey, they're also depressed and all of that from all of the stuff that happened earlier, right? But just the way they went through and merged all of these topics together, really starting off with chapter 1, and then cutting it off after the whole, like, hey, Nico's been saved, Kelpfish's hair is suddenly gone, right? Going to the whole shopping montage of stuff. Going back to the beginning of chapter 2 with all of the bedtime things, and then going to the very end of chapter 1 with all of the prophecy stuff, it works extremely well, and just the way the series is animated, the sound design is really awesome for sure. Like, just listening to it, I love hearing all of, like, the nice little sounds. I'm like, hey, I may want to put that in my D&D adventuring playlist at some point, right? Or, hey, that's just, like, a cool little action song. I would be interested to hear that more. And then, of course, just seeing the opening and all of that, and just, like, really looks like how this series is going to be treating itself throughout the next rest of its run. I honestly can't wait. If I'm not mistaken, Crunchyroll did confirm that we will be getting Witch Watch in 2 consecutive cours. Let me actually look that up. Yes, 2 continuous cours. I'm glad I actually had the Witch Watch anime announcement thing on my computer earlier from wherever I was doing research for that. Yes, it'll be running for 2 continuous cours, which is just absolutely awesome. So really, I can't say anything else, but I think this anime is going to be a big, massive moment, and that a lot of people are going to get brought on to Witch Watch, and honestly, I think Witch Watch is going to be getting a massive sales boost from this anime, right? So a lot of really cool stuff here in this episode. Again, just going through all of it again, this was Witch Watch episode number 1. It was titled The Witch's Return. The original manga is by Kinto Shinohara. Bilberry Animation Studios is doing the anime production for this anime pretty much, right? I said, how many times can I say anime in a sentence? And this episode covered chapters 1 and 2 of the manga, scrambled to make it so much better. Out of everything, I would give this episode like an easy, like, hey, a 9.5 to a 10 out of 10. Like, not that normally I'm going to score all of these, but just a really solid first episode. I can't wait to see episode 2 whenever it comes out. But yeah, with all of that, thank you guys so very much for watching this first Witch Watch anime episode review. I hopefully will be doing these every week, just talking about this series that I absolutely love so much. Yeah, with all of that being said, again, thank you guys so much for watching. I do plenty of other anime and manga related content here on the YouTube channel. Go to @Glowplasma on YouTube, or just go down to below this video and, like, hey, click on my channel icon, right? I talked about plenty of other manga series, like a bunch of things running in Weekly Shonen Jump, like Witch Watch, along with manga series like Kagurabachi, World Trigger, Naviatoria, and a few general others, pretty much, right? And then I also cover anime series whenever I have the time, but I will admit I have a terrible track record with talking about manga or talking about anime whenever the episodes come out. But if you want to check out all of those, I have covered the Hell's Paradise Shugoku Raku anime, the new Bleach anime, the Ranger Reject anime, along with the Link Click anime. You can find all of those anime reviews down in the description down below, or really just on the channel. I probably won't link all of them down below. I may link like 1 or 2 of them, right? But either way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Witch Watch episode number 1. And hey, I'll catch you guys next time for Witch Watch episode number 2. Again, next episode will be called what? A Giant Rookie, Let's Go to a Diner, and The Flying Classroom. So a lot of great stuff, like a really bright future it looks like for the Witch Watch anime. And I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.